Slavenka Drakulić, first of all, thank you very much for being here. I would like to start by asking you, how do you see this war in Ukraine? Do this war in any way resemble the wars in the former Yugoslavia?
Well, the short answer to that is, I think, both yes and no. Because what you recognize immediately, there are several elements. One element is, for example, the justification of the war, because the justification going to save somebody, going to save Ukrainians from their Nazi government, was very similar to what Milosevic did. He was going to Croatia to save Serbs there in jeopardy from then Croatian government. So he also went to Bosnia for the same reason, saving. And this is, you recognize it immediately as a propaganda, because this is there is no saving in question. So this is the method, the methodology, the justification, then the war propaganda, and even if you want words that they use, you know, the way, because war propaganda has to precede the war itself, because you have to convince your people who are going to the war that they are not going to the war, that they are going to free these people there. But you have to indicate who are these people there. And so in order to make a distinction between us and them, you have to use this mechanism. And of course, it was more difficult in Yugoslav wars, because, as you know, we lived very close. But it was also not so easy in Ukraine, or that is in Russia, because they and Ukrainians lived very close, connected, so much so that Ukraine had the problems with their establishing their national identity. So yes, there are many things that are on that level similar. What is not similar and what is very different, I would say, is how the world looks upon it. Because the wars in Yugoslavia, I have to say plural, they were neglected and ignored for a very long time as something, well, it's happening there. These people always fight. They are fighting for thousands of years against each other. And they're just wild people. Who knows why they are fighting?
It's just a local war.
Yes, exactly, and civil war only. So that first it wasn't even recognized as aggression or something. And so we do not have to worry about that. And also there was a big division between countries, you know, the main powers, the big powers, they were, I don't know, Germany was supporting, for example, Croatia, and the other countries were not. So it was, but mainly it is the perception. This is a small war. We don't have to worry about that. It's not a dangerous war. Here now, this is completely different. This is now a big war, of course, and it is because it's Russia is involved, and Russia is one of the main powers
it's a war live streaming around the world.
Absolutely, but it was very much so. Yeah, I have to say that 30 years ago, media were very, very present in the Balkan wars, and that it was almost as if you have a live streaming. So it was very, media were there, I have to say that. But here it's even more so, because we have all these social networks, no, where you can instantly getting the information, the pictures, all of that, for good and for bad. Because one thing is to get information, to get a picture, but then it has to be some context, some history, some explanation, some interpretation, some analysis. And this, I don't think that people on a social network level are not really getting. So, but it is a big war, and it is a big war in Europe. For that war, they were not saying, oh, we have another war in Europe again. It wasn't like that. Even now, Habermas wrote, oh, this is the first war after 77 years. Well, it's not really first. I mean, pay attention. But it is immediately perceived as a European war, as a big war. And we should not forget the main argument in that. and this is a atomic bomb, atomic arms. So this really is a dangerous game. And of course, Putin wants to be important and dangerous, but to be perceived like that. So on that level of recognition, of fear, of creating a different situation in public opinion all over the world, that's very, very, very different.
You have written extensively about the use of rape, of sexual violence during the war in the 90s, in Yugoslavian wars. There is violence that goes beyond any reason and instinct, because all wars are violent. But this is something more. What does it mean to use rape as a weapon?
Yeah, this is so to say, the new category in the international law.
Yeah.
Before that, well, the collateral victims of every war are women. They were considered to be collateral victims. That is, rape happens in every war. For example, for me, it's an interesting example that after the Second World War, when the Russian troops came to Europe, to Germany, there was mass rapes of millions of women. But we learned about that only 40 years later. That was amazing. That was as opposed to what happened in Bosnia, let's say, which we knew and heard about from the victims immediately. I can understand what was the reason before. The reason before was that they were victors. They were on the winning side. They were considered to be good guys, good force. But what were they doing then? Well, it's not very nice to say that they are raping women, and I think it was hush thing. Well, in Bosnia, we have to thank to these women that it really became truly part of international law, in the sense that we had also processes, like, for example, the first sentence that was given. And it was a Foča case in 2001 for something that happened in Foča, where Serbian men were forcing women to prostitution and use them sexually. Now, why and what does that really actually mean, that rapes are weapons of war, as it is now defined? It's we are not talking about random rapes. We are talking about systematic rapes. As you know, in Bosnia at that time, there were camps, rape camps, actually. So it was the conservative estimate is between 30 and 50,000 women were raped. And not only of Muslim nationality or ethnic group, but also of the others as well, but mostly of Muslim. What I think is here different is that it's not a command. It's not a command. But if you in any society, but the more patriarchal it is, the more difficult it is. If you in a very patriarchal society rape women from let's say one village or one territory by the ethnic group, please, it is proving to these men belonging to the same group that they cannot defend their women. And it is a very strong message. They are being shamed. We have to go back to the feminism of the 70s, when Susan Brown Miller wrote a book about rapes, and she proved that rape, so to say, under normal conditions, this is not a matter of sex, it is a matter of power. It's always proving power, and so much more so in the war. So they are raping them to prove that they are more powerful, that they are overpowering the other group and shaming the men from that very group. You don't want to be in the place where you were shamed in such a way. And therefore, in Bosnia, in these trials, it was considered to be also a weapon of war, but also a weapon of ethnic cleansing. This was the idea. We rape your women and you have to go away. You can't come back. And this was, this is how it was in Bosnia. And this the same thing for Rwanda, of course. And it is a very, from that point of view, it's a very strong message, because women are in this situation vulnerable. And what can they do? I mean, they are raped. And there is nobody to protect them. So that's the fact, you know. And it's therefore it is regarded as a weapons of war.
Do you think we have in Ukraine the same case of using rape as a weapon of ethnic cleansing? Because, you know, we have this debate if it is genocide or not, what is happening now in Ukraine. American president defined as genocide. Emmanuel Macron refused to do it.
Well, I don't think it is up to American president or to French president to define it. This has to be judged by competent judges. This has to come to the court of law. Generally speaking, a genocide, attempt of genocide is considered to be, so to say, an idea to not only to move ethnically people from their territory, but also to destroy these people. So the intention is defined as, the intention defines genocide. But of course, and this is where I'm very, very, what should I say, one has to be really conscious what we are talking about. It is not up to us. It has to be investigated. It has to be, for the moment now, when it is happening, it has to be documented. So the best service we can do as a journalist, as people in general, is to document these crimes. And then there will be somebody else saying, is it a war? Is it a war crime? Rape in the time of war is certainly war crime. But is it a genocidal or not? This is for somebody else to decide. And why should we put ourselves in a position of judges? I mean, I really think that this case has to come, for example, Bucha case has to come to some court, to international court. We do have such a court, but there are people who are advocating the special court now, lawyers, international lawyers, a special court for Russia. And this will be proved one day. And they, who will come to that court and who will, we don't know. But I mean, it will be proven for certain. And now just saying, oh, it is genocide. It's a, I'm afraid when politicians use these words, that they are using then in a political sense. Yes, exactly. So it's a, you know, it's a, it doesn't really help either victims or anybody else. It is for the, it is a kind of propaganda. So let's stick to the law in that sense. Yeah.
You know, there was the same with Holodomor, because the world didn't recognize it as a genocide immediately. It took, I don't know, some few decades, I believe.
Yes, decades, of course. Yeah. They did. Yeah. But I mean, what does it help if you, I mean, in a political sense, it makes sense, because then you have to decide, okay, there is a genocide going on and we have to help it. So it's for mobilization purpose, no? But in the long run, mobilization or no mobilization, it's another aspect of it. Yeah.
Another question from this war is, you know, what turns an ordinary man into a war criminal? And this is a very important theme for you. You know, what is the psychological, social, and political mechanism, and how does it work to transform a man who could never hurt a fly, it's your book, in a war criminal?
I think the best answer to that was given not by me, which I tried to give by showing that people, men or women from all strata, or all kind of professions, all kind of backgrounds, all kind of class, if you want, different people could come into situation. So we are now speaking about the role of circumstances as, I think, prevailing in such a situation to become a war criminal. But the best for everybody who is interested in that subject, it is American historian Christopher Browning.
Yeah.
So American historian Christopher Browning wrote a book about, is it battalion or brigade? It's called Ordinary Men, and it is he studied one battalion, or well, is it brigade or battalion? I can't. But the point is the following: in Germany, they were volunteers. These were people who volunteered. They were from all walks of life. And they were given a task to go to Poland and exterminate Jews. So in 1942, they went to Poland, they exterminated Jews and mass killings and so on. What was interesting in that group, it turned out, because they were later on in the 60s, they went on trial. So it was a lot of material that Christopher Browning could study. And what was interesting there is that people could, these men, they were in position to say, okay, I don't want to take part in it. I don't want to go on killing people, and nothing would happen to them. Apparently, it was, I think, less than 10 men out of 500 who did that. Nothing happened to them. One man said, I have small children, I cannot kill children. So he opted out of these actions. And so, of course, partly it was explained psychologically by the pressure of the group, but basically these people had a choice. They were A, volunteer, B, they had a choice. So this makes you think really about the power of circumstances. Now, in my book, I have taken some of these men who were just ordinary people, very nice guys, very...
An ordinary neighbor.
Exactly. And they would help a neighbor who is of a different ethnic group and so on. But then one of these men, and he was, I think, 23 years old at that time, and his name is Goran Jelisic, came into position to become a guard in a camp, in a concentration camp where they were gathering people, Muslims there. He was given arms. He was given, I don't know what is a rifle or what, and he was put in the position in Brčko, in the position of deciding about life and death. He actually became God in a sense. So a man who was nice, who was kind, who would probably got up if I come to a tram, give me a seat to sit there. He, because of the circumstances, was given arm, was given power, and then he was killing, I don't know how many, he said, I have to kill, I don't know how many people, let's say 10 people before I drink my first morning coffee. So he was proven to kill, I don't know how many exactly, but allegedly he killed more than 100 people in that camp in Brčko. Now, this is only the example how much the circumstances could decide. And in advocating this approach, I would also mention Milgram and also Stanford experiments. They did quite a lot of experiments in the States, showing how people listen to the command, obeying the command, even when they hear that the other side is suffering. This is Milgram experiment, and then Stanford experiment, when people really take a power and believe in the role they were given. They were divided between prisoners and what's the word for that? And the guard. And there were, I think, 2 or 3 movies made on the example from the experience of the Stanford experiments. And so Philippe Zimbardo, who was a professor who was leading this experiment, had to stop it because it became too dangerous. But he wrote a lot about this, and there are several books. That one is then Raoul Hilberg, the Origin of Evil. And so, in other words, there is quite a lot of literature that shows how people are able, that is answering to that question, how they are able to cross to the other side. They have to be convinced in what they are doing, that what they are doing is just. Goran Jelisic, who was killing prisoners, he believed that he has a right to do it because he was given arms to kill them in in a situation when he judges to do so because they are of another ethnicity. So he had to be sure that these are the enemies, and to be covered in the sense that he's not going to be responsible for that. No? So there are. I would incline to this approach that the circumstances are mostly deciding about that, because if it is the question, as we like to say, of mad people, of some people who are monsters, certainly in every war there are people who enjoy killing, but there are psychopaths, and psychopaths, they are only a very small number. Yeah. Yeah. And I was talking to some experts, and they say, well, perhaps 0.5 of crimes were committed by such a people. But in that case, they're not interesting for us. What is interesting for us are ordinary, normal, good people who are, and
people like us.
Exactly. And this is an unpleasant theme and a pleasant issue. And this is why people call them monsters, because this is a kind of self-defense. You know, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. You don't know. The bitter truth of my research and my writing, they would never hurt a fly, is, I don't know. You do not know yourself. You do not know what would happen to you if you would come in such and such circumstances. You don't know.
Yeah,
at the bottom, it seems that this is really a question of human nature, in the sense that we have both capabilities, both abilities in us to be extremely good and also to commit such horrifying and hideous crimes. And we have to, obviously, humanity is struggling with it for thousands of years, you know, with from religion and religious rules to the law and international law. So obviously, we basically do recognize that this is how we are, and we have to handle it. And I think it's no longer time to be surprised with that. Because the question is, okay, if this is 21st century Europe, how is it possible to happen here?
Yeah.
I mean, how? I can tell you exactly how. I can take you step by step through this process of constructing the other, constructing the enemy, making yourself justified in what you are doing. It's all known. There is so much to read and so the answers are there, but we don't like them.
Yeah, because you don't know how you would act.
Although you think you do.
Yeah.
That's an illusion. I think that.
Yeah, we all want to think good about ourselves.
Exactly.
We have a good
and that's
story.
Very good. I think this is good. I think this is good, because imagine if you think, oh, well, you know, I can commit bad as well. Well, I think it's better to believe that you can do only good. But to be so sure, I have to say, after the experience of reading and writing and researching these people that I wrote about, I don't believe in that any longer.
There is this case in Grossman, you know, the guy who killed people as his job, but he's at the same time he's a very good father.
Yes, why not? That's perfectly possible.
That's frightening. Yeah.
It is, but Hannah Arendt wrote about that. Yeah. You know, about the fact that such people could divide themselves into professionals. Yes. Professionals are doing what they are doing, what they are ordered to do, or what they, you know, what's their job. Their job is killing people. Okay, I'm killing people. But at home, when I come home, I mean, of course, I'm a very good father, a very good grandfather, a very good husband, a friend.
I could never hurt a fly at home.
Exactly.
That's frightening.
Exactly. At home, no, only professionally.
You know, it's at some point, one of the accused in Focha case, you mentioned in one of your books, replied, "What should I be arrested? It's not like I killed them."
Exactly. And that's frightening.
Yeah.
Because he was in a position to kill these girls. Yeah. He was only raping them.
He had mercy.
He only also said one more thing. He said, I saved their lives. So imagine that kind of defense. Yeah. So my seeing that a process, I thought this guy have absolutely no idea why they are sentenced. They did nothing. They had the brothel and they were, renting these girls to the other people and raping them. Okay, big deal. Boys just had fun.
Like Adolf Eichmann, with my hands, I didn't kill anyone.
He saved them. He saved them because somebody else might have killed them. So how grateful these girls are for being saved in this way, this is another question. But it sounds to us, not to him, it sounds to us very, very cynical. Yeah. But in reality, this was his defense.
Yeah. Why do you think Russian people don't revolt? Have they a choice? Because this is a question in debate here in Romania, for example.
Well, Romania should know better. How many Romanians opposed to Ceausescu? How many? How many Romanians, how many Bulgarians or how many Hungarians, rebel? This is not in, if you live under totalitarian regime. The fact that in Russia, they say we have democracy, that they have democratic institutions, that they have multi-party system, that they have parliament or whatever, it's one thing. But the way Russia is ruled is totalitarian. And people living there know better. They know that to rebel, they know that to think differently, they will have to pay. And the price nowadays is very high. You go 15 years to prison only if you mention the word war, much less anything else. But I do think that they live under different conditions than under Stalin. And therefore, that in a way, their passivity, their indifference to what the government is doing, which is very obvious, except for these very brave people who come out and protest. Yes. But there are, and you know how big Russia is, there are just a very small number of them, extremely brave, and we are very grateful to them. I think that they are actually in this way collaborating with Putin, as they always did with the communist governments before in each of our countries. We were collaborators because we shut up and we don't make fuss and we do not dare because we don't want to pay the price. That's it. It's very opportunistic attitude, and this is why they're. But on the other hand, I would take it as an important fact that they get news nowadays, especially only from the official sources. Not only that they are used to believe to the governmental source of information. They are used to believe to that. Because it's easier. It's easier to believe in than to question, to ask questions. It is really essentially an opportunism and collaboration. So just leave me. Okay, you want to go to Ukraine. It's not good. I don't like it. But what can I do? The process of thinking, and this is my whole work. I would say my whole body of work is to show that you could have political change overnight, as it happened in 1989. But that the whole mentality, that is the history, the tradition, the habits, the ways of living, the ways of thinking, do not change so quickly.
And I believe also the trauma could be inherited from one generation to another.
I don't think it's actually inherited. I think it is it exists in the history, in collective memory, even as a myth, And and here it's what I think is very important, it's knowing your own history, knowing the facts. As you know, the history in the communist countries was always controlled by the Communist Party. It is always some kind of official history. Yes. And then there is a gap between what you remember, what collectively you remember, and what was the officially told to us. So this combination is not very good because there is a gap between what you know in quote, and between what you remember. And it is Timothy Snyder, when you mentioned him earlier, who said, and I use it as a motto in my latest book, Café Europa Revisited, he said, history without memory is impossible, but memory without history is dangerous. And I think what is happening now in this invasion of Russia in Ukraine is actually memory without history, because memory is something that you can manipulate, that you can say it was like this, even if it wasn't, which means that you create some kind of myth. And in every nation, every country, there are some myths about people. We can call them prejudices, but they are also myths. And they are used when you do not know your history, then, or history in general, then this can be used in a sense that somebody is serving you what you have to believe in. It's much easier to manipulate people who do not know history. So in that sense, it is dangerous to have only memory. And also memory can be, it's a very emotional thing. And, you know, for the war, for going to the war, for preparing for the war, you need emotions, you need to, you need the belief, and you need emotions. So I think it all has somehow fits into this picture of what is happening in Russia, with information, with people, with history,
and
with
how
memory.
can Putin change the significance of words or of what's happening, like denazification? He pretends to do now a denazification.
Well, he can say anything and they believe what he says. I mean, this is a typical manipulation. Yes, there were in Ukraine during the Second World War and before some forces, there were pro-Nazi forces and so on. But I mean, to say for today's Ukraine that the government is Nazi, it's just a stupid lie. But we know if you repeat it 100 times, and if you go through the state-owned media, and if you tell your soldiers, now you're going to liberate poor Ukrainians from their Nazi government, well, there you are.
Yeah, it's my last question. Do you think we will see Putin on Hague?
Well, no, maybe not in The Hague, but I don't know. It's International Criminal Court in The Hague exists. But this is really like looking into a crystal ball. I have no idea. But you have to know one thing, which is what we very often forget. And I think the National Court for former Yugoslavia in The Hague had a problem with that. And this is that neither Americans nor Russians recognize international courts of justice. So first of all, Russia would not collaborate. It would take enormous changes in Russia to collaborate to deliver the Putin, so to say. It's another thing with Serbia and Milosevic, but Putin is not Milosevic. So that's one obstacle. You have to work with the government, and that's very, very difficult in this case. And as I say, in that respect, Americans are no better. So this is a very big question, but it's really not possible to answer it. But of course, I am very much for the international court and for investigating each of these crimes that is happening now.
Thank you very much.